Hi, I'm Alex. I remember walking to class one day in a hot, humid morning of August 2013. I didn't have my breakfast, so I wasn't in the best of moods. And that was obviously a bad choice. Kids by nature, children by nature, students by nature, they're always they're a bit fearless, and they always try to want to test and see what kind of limit they can push with you. And I wasn't very aware of that back then. So just walking to class and rolling out my lessons. So my lesson on that day wasn't particularly exciting. It wasn't extraordinary. So kids were expected to do their practices independently, and then out of the blue, this one kid stood up and audaciously exclaimed, "Sir, you stupid." I didn't know what to say. I thought I was a very patient person. That was until I signed up to teach. Then, I don't know what spirit got into him. With utmost confidence, he decided to spell it out for me. Sir, S-U-P-I-D. And then the whole classroom burst into thunderous laughter. And he didn't know what hit him. So that was one of the many examples of experiences that I had when I was teaching. I have had my car tires slashed. I've got kids weaving in and out of classroom. I've got kids who would, in the middle of the lesson, would pick up a broom and brush their friend's face. I've got kids who pee into their classmates' water bottle and trick their classmates to drink. Whether they got smarter or not, I don't know. I've had the experience of having to fight off triad members in their bid to recruit my students. And this kind of experiences left me quite emotional after I left school. But I came to a realization that these kids, they actually have zero interest in the lesson. They have zero interest in whatever that goes on in proper classroom. And it was very sad that we would often try to remediate that by maybe giving them warning letters. So I always ask myself, can giving warning letters ever reform these students? Can caning them more help them to reflect on the poor choices that they've made? I doubt so. At the end of the day, there's this one reality in my state of defeatedness and helplessness. There was this one reality that was staring back at me. It was that my kids can't read, that my kids are illiterate. And because of their state of literacy, they are not able to make sense of what goes on in the classroom. Literacy is the ability to identify, understand, interpret, create, communicate, and compute printed or written materials in varying contexts. At least that's the definition provided to us by the UNESCO. Now we know the lack of literacy has many ramifications. We'll go to that later. I want to present to you this passage. It is a year one passage with complexity benchmark against the Ministry of Education's syllabus for English language. Now, my friends and I, we conducted a study on 600 students from 10 schools in the Klang district. And this This is what we found. In summary, 95% of students were reading below the expected level of proficiency. This is alarming for one reason. We're no longer saying we are not reading enough. We are essentially saying we could not read. That we're not able to read, and we don't know how to read. The ramifications of illiteracy is obvious. In general, poorer health from lack of access to accurate healthcare-related information, lower socio-economic mobility, higher risk of being indoctrinated with radical fundamentalist ideology from the lack of ability to verify and discern information. And the most terrible curse of all, intergenerational illiteracy. And that moves us to the second part of the conversation, which is nation building. Literacy has everything to do with building a strong nation. And before we proceed further, I would like to take us on a good departure away from the postulations of Rousseau, Hobbes, Locke. If you're in political science, these names would be familiar to you, on their concepts of the nation-state and nationalism. Is it possible for us to talk about nation building away from empty rhetorics of imperialistic nationalism? Yes, we can. A nation is more than just political borders. What is a nation without its people? Now, that begs us the question, what do we then invest in? Do we invest in more flags, grand march pasts, very catchy anthems, more expensive televised propaganda, more flags, more banners? We can continue to reflect on these questions. If we peel back the layers of nationalism, the right question to ask is not, how are my political affiliations superior to yours? That's not the question. The right question to ask is, how do we best serve the people who take refuge in this land? For all the benefits of literacy, better access to healthcare, wider career prospect, a more dignified life, are these not universal aspirations? Do the people whom we come into contact with every day not deserve these? I would do my job well today if we walk away from this hall knowing that there are two things we can do. Number one, volunteer at school. Reading is a highly intimate activity. And yet, teachers in school have no capacity to be teaching kids how to read one-on-one. And the state of affairs that we have today is when kids fail to learn how to read, in that particular year, he or she gets automatically progressed, moved on, promoted to the following year, regardless of its level of mastery. What can we do then? Get to know a high-need school, inquire how you can assist a teacher in that school, and then adopt a few students and read with them. Because when you adopt a student to read with them, you are ensuring that there are more students going to the following year, progressing to the following year, knowing how to read. That's the first thing we can all do. Second, build community reading initiatives. I personally lead one, and every Saturday in KL, in a underserved community, my friends and I will set up a space where people can come and volunteer with us and read with kids in that area. So what can we do? Number one, sub-bullet one, identify an underserved community, bring your friends, bring people together, commit to reading with the kids on a weekly basis, and where possible, because we're Malaysians, find excuse to eat together. The effect that we've seen on the people who were with us is highly inspiring. We saw that community bonds were being built, we were bridging gaps, and we were fostering social integration. Now we need to look past reading and literacy in technical sense. Reading is more than just recognizing sounds, gaining fluency, and then comprehending the text. Reading goes beyond all that. It contributes to our emotional development. Reading patiently and allowing the same material to speak to both persons behind the book creates a bond that speaks much louder than audible words will ever will. It says, I care for your reading. It says, I am deeply interested in you having a promising future. It says that I am here for you. Let's do this together. At the end of the day, through reading together, lives are transformed. People are beginning to believe in themselves. People are beginning to trust in the humanness of the other person, regardless of what cultural background he is from. People are beginning to reject tribal war cries of politicians inciting distrust and disharmony. And people are finally beginning to see that you and I are just ordinary human beings seeking to love and be loved. We're building a social movement of literacy. And what that essentially means is that it is a rebellion against the nonsense of the day. We're essentially saying that we, the people, are creating positive social impact, which you are not. We're saying, yes, we can do better than some elected representatives. Is this ideal? No. Our elected representatives are meant to be helping us moving towards a more dignified life. But is it right to wait for the world to fall before we start intervening? Can we afford to wait while lives are heading towards destruction? Literacy, or the lack of it, affects us all. Merely knowing how to read won't save us when the person next to us can't read. We either win together or we lose it all. Literacy goes beyond the duty of a teacher. It is ours to embrace, not so much as for the sake of the person next to us, but for the sake of our children and for the sake of our humanity. And at the end of the day, and if we work hard for this cause, we work hard because we believe that one day, every child will be able to read. Thank you.